Hello, and welcome to another microtraining video. This time we are going to talk about how to pull data from the IDR. Luckily, this video can be supplemented with an article that we have hosted on Code Commons. So if you go to Code Commons, look at our articles, best practices, and click CDR IDR data connection usage. This article goes through the entire process on how to connect to the IDR in more detail than is going to be described in this video. So you should read this article in its entirety for the full details, but to put it briefly, you're going to need specific job codes that is assigned to your EUA account. You might have different job codes than the ones depicted in this demo, so you'll need to edit them as you go. IDR connection works on an access token based system. For full details on what that means, we are going to discuss them when we get to the code. So let's do that now. Here I have a notebook that is simply all of the code from that demo article hosted in a notebook. So let's talk about this code cell by cell. The first two cells here are installations of libraries you will need. The first one is the Databricks OIDC. This is an internal library authored by the Analytics Workspace team. This next one is the Databricks SDK. This one is built by Databricks themselves, and we will need it for what comes. Next is a cell that simply restarts Python so that the libraries we just installed will be importable. So let's run these cells now. This could take you up to a minute to run. Okay, that didn't take me too long. So now let's look at this next cell, which actually has interesting code to run. So we are going to import some of the objects from those libraries that we need. We're going to set up some environment variables. We're going to create a client object, and then we are finally going to create our Snowflake options. So there is a function here from our OIDC library called getSnowflakeOptions. Snowflake is simply an external server we use as the backend to the IDR. So we are going to set up a few environment variables here as well. So the Snowflake database is IDRC underscore PRD. The schema is what you will change. This is the schema that you will be reading your data from. This is the Snowflake warehouse. And the Snowflake role is my EUA role. So this is the one that I am going to use. But if you have a different EUA role, you will need to fill that in here. All right, I'm going to run this cell, and it is going to now ask for authentication. Okay, once that code finishes running, you should see a big QR code on your screen. There are a few ways to authenticate here. You can use your phone to scan this QR code and access authentication through your phone if you have that set up, but I believe it is easier to just use your browser here. So if you see this code at the bottom here, this is going to be your authentication token. So you might want to copy that now. And then you can click idmcms.gov/activate. I'm not going to do that on screen here because I don't want to show you my username. Okay, once that code finishes running, you should see a big QR code on your screen. You can scan this with your phone to finish authentication there if you have authentication set up on your phone, but I believe it is easier to just use your web browser. If you see at the bottom here, there is a string of capital letters. That is going to be an authentication token, so you'll want to copy that. And then you'll click this link, idm.cms.gov/activate. This will take you to a login page where you will enter this authentication key and then a username and password. Even though this is an IDM link, you will use your EUA username and password to authenticate. Okay, I'm going to do that now and I will rejoin you in a few moments. Okay, once you have finished the authentication process, the big ugly QR code will vanish and then you'll be free to access the IDR. In this next cell, we have a read from the IDR, and you'll notice that it is simply PySpark code using the Snowflake format. So Spark, read, format, Databricks has their own Snowflake connector. You will do dot options, and then you will input the options object that we have made in the cell above. And then you will query it like it was any old SQL database. So here we're using dot option, we're using it to access by query, and we're just doing a select count. And then we'll execute this cell, and we should get the number of rows in this table. Okay, we have 370 rows. Success! We have successfully connected to the IDR and queried it. So what have we done today? We have learned how to read from the IDR. It is a permissions-based, token-based process. But thankfully, we have a custom library to read from our Snowflake server. The authentication, which was the difficult part here, involved creating this options object, which required a lot of authentication. Reading from the IDR uses built-in PySpark Snowflake connectors aided by our custom options object. Okay, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.